The night sky above the forest planet was filled with silver clouds and faint stars. In the distance, the sound of animals echoed, strange cries that belonged to no earth creature. The forest itself was alive. Glowing plants lit up the underbrush, and tall trees reached so high they seemed to touch the sky. It was a place full of mystery and silence. But the silence broke when something heavy descended from the stars. A large alien ship entered the atmosphere. Its dark hull reflected no light, and its engines hummed with deep power. The ship landed in a clearing, crushing the grass beneath its weight. The ground shook as its landing gear sank into the soft soil. The air smelled of burned metal and strange gases as the ship cooled from its travel through space. The hunters had arrived. The first to step out of the ship was their leader, Darnik. He was tall, his skin a mix of rough gray and deep green, with long ridges running down his arms. His eyes were sharp and full of pride. Behind him followed a group of 10 hunters, each carrying weapons that looked both sharp and advanced. They moved with discipline, their boots leaving heavy prints on the forest floor. Darnik raised his clawed hand and pointed toward the trees. Somewhere out there, he said in his own language, a human hides. We will show the galaxy that humans are nothing but fragile prey. This hunt will prove it. The other hunters growled in agreement. They had traveled across many worlds and caught many kinds of prey. Some creatures ran, some fought, but in the end they all fell. Humans were known in stories, but the hunters had never faced one directly. Darnik believed this would be their easiest challenge yet. The hunters spread their equipment around the clearing. One placed a scanner on the ground, which beeped as it searched for heat signatures. Another raised a tall antenna that could track movement over long distances. Small, flying drones lifted into the air, their red eyes glowing as they began to map the forest. Darnik watched all of this with confidence. He believed the human would try to run, maybe hide in caves or climb the trees. But running would change nothing. The hunters had speed, strength, and advanced technology. No human could stand against that. To Darnik, this hunt was not a question of if they would succeed, only how quickly. But in the shadows of the forest, a pair of human eyes watched them. Rion crouched on a branch high above the ground. His face was calm, though his heart beat fast. He had been on this planet for weeks after his exploration ship had crashed. Life had been hard. Food was not easy to find, and the strange animals gave him little rest. But he had survived. He had built tools from stone and wood, made fire, and even learned the patterns of the forest. Now new visitors had come, and from the look of them, they were not friendly. He watched their leader speak, even though he did not understand the alien language fully. The tone of the voice told him everything. These were hunters. They had not come to talk or to help. They had come to find him. Rion smiled slightly. Most people would feel fear, but Rion had a different thought. If they wanted a hunt, he would give them one, but not the kind they expected. The hunters soon finished setting up their camp. Darnik ordered 2 of them to search east and 2 more to go west. The rest stayed close, scanning the area. The drones returned with maps, showing broken paths through the trees. The scanners detected traces of heat in the forest. Darnik pointed at the largest signal. That is where the human is, he said with certainty. But the signal was nothing more than the remains of a campfire. Rion had left it burning on purpose. Knowing they would come, the hunters marched quickly toward the smoke, eager to find their prey. They moved with heavy steps, weapons ready. While the forest animals fled at their approach, Rion followed them from above. Moving from tree to tree, he stayed quiet, careful not to break branches. He wanted to see their faces when they reached the camp. Already he could imagine their frustration. A small laugh escaped his lips as he thought about it. To Rion, this was no longer just survival. It was a chance to turn the hunt into a game. As the hunters entered the clearing where the fire burned, they slowed their steps. The camp looked real enough. A small tent stood near the fire. Footprints covered the ground, and food was left half-cooked on stones. Darnik raised his hand and signaled for silence. The hunters surrounded the tent, ready to strike. One of them kicked the cloth open, expecting the human to leap out. But what they found were shapes made of grass and cloth, stuffed to look like humans lying inside. Empty faces stared back at them. The hunters froze for a moment, then one growled in anger. Another smashed the dummy with his weapon. Darnik stepped forward, his face dark with rage. They had been fooled. At that moment, a strange sound echoed through the trees. It was not an animal cry. It was something else, something the hunters had never heard before. It was laughter, human laughter, sharp and mocking. The sound came from above them, bouncing from tree to tree. The hunters spun in every direction, searching for the source, but the forest hid it well. Darnik clenched his fists. He realized the human was not weak, not frightened, but clever. Instead of running, the human was playing with them, the hunters. Were being made into fools, and they could feel it deep in their pride. Darnik shouted to his hunters to keep moving. He would not let a human mock him for long. High above, Ryun continued to watch. His eyes shone with mischief. He had survived, alone on this world, and now he had new energy. These hunters thought they were in control, but he was going to show them who truly had the advantage. This was no longer their hunt. It was his game. The forest returned to silence. But now it carried a new tension. The hunters had entered confident, certain of their power. Now, their pride was already wounded. The human had set the stage, and the game was only beginning. The forest clearing was silent except for the low crackle of the dying fire. The hunters stood around the empty tent, their faces hard with frustration. They had expected victory, but instead, they found nothing but grass dummies and smoke. The smell of cooked roots still hung in the air, but the human was nowhere to be seen. Darnik clenched his sharp hand into a fist. His pride burned inside him. The human is mocking us, he growled to his hunters. But we will not be tricked again. Spread out. He cannot hide forever. The hunters obeyed. Though their eyes showed doubt, they were used to quick hunts. Clean hunts, not games. One bent down to study the footprints on the ground. He noticed they circled around the camp again and again, almost as if the human had walked in circles on purpose. The trail led into the trees, but even that seemed to clear, to perfect. Still, they followed. The forest grew darker as they moved deeper inside. Strange plants glowed faint blue along the path. Tall trees blocked most of the sky, and the only light came from the hunters' scanners. They walked in silence, every step heavy, every sense alert. Somewhere above them, hidden in the branches, Ryun followed with quiet steps of his own. He watched the hunters carefully. He saw how they moved with discipline, but he also saw cracks forming in their group. Two of them argued softly about which direction the tracks led. Another muttered about wasted time. Ryun smiled to himself. He wanted them to grow restless. Because restless hunters made mistakes. After a long walk, the hunters reached another clearing. And there it was again, a camp. This one was larger than the first. There were 3 tents, a stronger fire still burning, and even tools lying around as if left in a hurry. Darnik's eyes narrowed. It looked too easy. He ordered his team to surround the camp slowly. They spread out, weapons ready. Their steps pressed into the soft dirt. Their breathing heavy. One of the hunters rushed forward and ripped open a tent flap. Inside he found another dummy, this one sitting by a wooden bowl. Its head was nothing but cloth stuffed with leaves, but its shape fooled the eye at first glance. Another tent held the same, but the third tent made them all stop. Inside was a figure that looked very real at first. It was lying on its side, covered in a thin blanket. The shape of the body was human. The hunters raised their weapons, ready to strike, but when they pulled the blanket away, their pride was wounded even deeper. The figure was nothing more than a bundle of wood tied together with rope. A crude figure, but placed with such care that it tricked them until the last moment. Suddenly a sound broke the silence again. It was faint, but it was there. A laugh. Human laughter. It came from the trees once more. Far away, but close enough to be clear. The hunters spun around, weapons raised, but they saw only shadows. The forest gave them no answer. Darnik roared in frustration. His hunters looked at one another with uneasy faces. The human was not just surviving. He was playing with them as if they were children. The mighty hunters, feared across worlds, were being made into a joke. We keep moving. Darnik commanded, his voice full of anger. He cannot laugh forever. He will tire. And when he does, we will catch him. They left the second camp behind, but their steps grew heavier. Some of them no longer moved with the same energy. Their pride was shaken. High in the trees, Rian watched them again. His lips curved in a quiet grin. He could see the cracks widening in their unity. They did not trust each other as much as before. They doubted their leader's judgment. Though they did not dare show it too clearly, Rian thought about his next move. He did not want to hurt them directly, but he wanted to keep their pride burning until it collapsed. The hunters continued to follow the tracks, but once again, the trail split into three directions. One set of footprints went north, another south, and another east. The hunters argued in low voices. One said the human must have gone north because the prints were deeper. Another said east, because the branches there were broken. Darnik silenced them with a wave of his hand. We will divide. He said, 3 groups. We will cover all paths. He cannot escape. The hunters did as ordered. But division made them weaker. Each group was smaller, easier to confuse, easier to trick. Rian noticed this from above, and he decided to make them suffer. For it, the group that went north followed the path for a long time until they found another camp. But this one was different. Instead of dummies, the camp had only a single item. A piece of bark carved with alien letters. It read in their own tongue, to slow. The hunters stared at it in disbelief. Their hands shook with anger. One of them tore the bark in half, but the message was already burned into their pride. At the same time, the group that went south fell into a different trick. They followed footprints that led straight into a muddy pit hidden by leaves. 2 of them slipped and fell into the mud, their weapons dirty, their pride even more so. When they pulled themselves out, they noticed another wooden sign hanging from a tree nearby. This one said, "Nice try." The last group, the ones who went east, found nothing but broken branches and empty air. The trail ended suddenly, as if the human had disappeared into the wind. When all 3 groups met again, their anger was clear. They spoke loudly, their words sharp, blaming one another for wasting time. Darnik shouted over them to regain control, but even his voice sounded less certain than before. From a distance, Rian sat in the trees and watched. He could see how tired they looked, how their steps dragged more than before. He knew they would not give up easily, but he also knew they were no longer the proud hunters they had been at the start. He had pulled them into his game, and now they danced to his rhythm. Night fell across the forest. The glowing plants lit the paths in soft blue light, and the cries of strange animals echoed again. The hunters set up their real camp, but this time they placed guards all around. They ate in silence, each one lost in thought, their pride wounded. Darnik sat alone, staring into the fire. His jaw was tight, his mind full of anger, but also a trace of worry he would never admit. High above, Rian made his own fire in a hidden spot. He ate a simple meal, smiling to himself. He thought about the hunters' faces when they saw the fake camp, the signs, the tricks. To him, it was a battle of patience, not strength. And patience was something he had learned well on this lonely world. The hunters believed they were closing in, but Rian knew the truth. They were walking exactly where he wanted them to go. The game was far from over. The sun rose slowly over the forest, painting the trees with soft gold light. Birds with shining wings glided between branches, and strange insects buzzed in the tall grass. But the beauty of the morning meant nothing to the hunters. Their pride was wounded, and they wanted revenge. Darnik stood tall in the center of their camp. His voice was firm, though his eyes showed his anger. The human thinks we are fools. He thinks this is a game. But we are hunters. Today we end this. His hunters nodded, but their energy was low. Some still carried mud on their armor from falling into the pit. Others rubbed their arms and legs, tired from chasing false trails. None of them spoke loudly anymore. Their laughter and confidence from the night of arrival were gone. Darnik ordered the scanners to be activated again. The machines buzzed and scanned the land. Soon one of them beeped loudly. The display showed footprints leading toward the rocky canyon at the edge of the forest. The tracks were strong and clear. as if the human had passed recently. "This is it," Darnick said. He runs to the canyon. "There will be no more tricks there. Stone has no place to hide. We will catch him." The hunters gathered their weapons and followed the trail. Their heavy boots struck the ground in rhythm. Drones flew above them, mapping the way. The canyon lay far ahead, but the hunters walked with stubborn strength. In the trees above, Rian moved quietly. He watched them follow the prints he had left on purpose. His eyes shone with calm amusement. He had spent half the night stamping the ground with extra footprints to make the trail easy to find. He wanted them to go to the canyon, because that was where he had prepared his next joke. The path grew rougher as the forest thinned. The trees spread apart, replaced by stone and dry bushes. Sharp cliffs rose on both sides as they neared the canyon. The air grew dry, and the sound of wind whistled through narrow gaps. The hunters marched with focus, but cracks appeared again. One of them muttered that the trail was too easy. Another said the human was only one person. Yet they had spent too much time already. Darnick silenced them, but doubt still lived in their eyes. At the mouth of the canyon, the footprints split. Again, one set went left, another right, and another straight ahead. Darnick cursed under his breath. He hated these games, but still, he made his choice. "We split again," he ordered. "3 paths, 3 groups. The human will not escape this time." The hunters divided once more. The left group followed the narrow trail along the canyon wall. The wind howled in their ears as they climbed. Over sharp rocks, the prints continued, but after a while, the trail ended at another small camp. A fire burned low, and a dummy sat beside it, holding a wooden stick as if roasting food. The hunters froze, anger burning in their eyes. Carved into the stone nearby were alien words scratched by hand. The message read, "To slow again." The hunters smashed the dummy into pieces, but their pride was already broken a little more. The right group followed another trail that twisted between tall cliffs. The prints seemed fresh, and their hearts beat faster with the hope of finally catching the human. But the trail ended at a wall of rocks. The hunters searched and searched, but there was no sign of escape. Only when one looked up did he notice something that made his stomach twist. On the rock wall above them, painted in thick black lines, were 2 eyes staring down. Large, simple, human-like eyes. Watching them, the hunters shivered despite themselves. They fired at the rock in anger, but the paint stayed. The eyes continued to stare. As if mocking them, the group that went straight ahead had the hardest path. They followed the footprints deeper into the canyon until they found something strange. A full camp was set up. Several tents, tools, even what looked like food supplies in wooden boxes. At first they thought they had one. Finally, the humans' real camp. But as they stepped closer, their hearts sank. The tents were filled with nothing but rocks and broken wood. The food supplies were only empty shells of fruit carved to look full from a distance. Even the tools were fake, made of branches shaped like blades. Then they saw the sign. It was hanging from a rope tied between 2 tents. It was painted in their own alien language. Though clearly by human hand, the words read, "Still hunting." Their anger exploded. One hunter ripped the sign down. Another kicked the fake tools across the ground. They screamed in their language, their voices echoing against the canyon walls. But no matter how much they shouted, it did not change the truth. The human had tricked them again. By the time the 3 groups reunited, their pride was shattered even more. They shared their stories, each one worse than the other. Darnick listened, his face dark, his claws dug into the dirt. He had promised an easy hunt, but now they looked like fools from above the canyon wall. Rian lay flat on his stomach, watching them with a grin. His heart beat quickly, but not from fear. From joy. The hunters thought they were the strongest, but he had turned them into his audience. Every camp, every sign, every trick was a message. He was telling them that strength alone was not enough. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon. The hunters set up their real camp at the canyon's mouth. They did not speak much. Their movements were slow, their shoulders heavy. Even their leader looked older, his pride weighed down by the day's humiliation. At night, as they sat around their fire, a sound reached them again. It was the laugh, the same human laugh that had haunted them before. But this time, it came from high above the canyon. It echoed down the stone walls, bouncing in every direction. The hunters stood quickly, weapons raised, but the laugh only grew louder, filling the night. Some hunters wanted to shoot into the darkness. Others begged Darnik to stay calm. Darnik raised his hand and shouted for silence. But even he could not hide the truth. His eyes moved nervously, searching the shadows, searching the cliffs. The human was not prey. The human was everywhere, watching, waiting, and laughing. High on the canyon wall, Rian sat beside his small fire, staring at the stars. He ate slowly, his body tired but his spirit alive. He thought about the hunters below, and he knew tomorrow would bring more fun. The chase had only just begun, and he had many more tricks to show. The hunters woke with heavy eyes as the morning sun spilled into the canyon. Their campfire had burned down to ashes, and the air was filled with the cries of strange birds circling above. They had spent the night restless, their dreams filled, with laughter echoing through stone walls. Even the strongest among them admitted to hearing it long after it had faded. Darnik rose first. His body was strong, but his pride was worn thin. He looked at his hunters, all silent, all avoiding his eyes. They had never known such shame. He pointed toward the forest beyond the canyon. We follow him back into the trees. He hides there, not here. Today we end his game. The hunters obeyed. They marched out of the canyon, weapons ready, eyes sharp. The forest welcomed them again, full of tall trees and glowing plants. The ground was soft with leaves, and every step made a sound that echoed in the silence. Drones flew above, scanning for heat, but the trees blocked their view, unseen. In the branches, Rian watched them return. He had expected this. He knew the canyon had shaken their pride, but he also knew they would not give up. That was why he had spent most of the night preparing his next move. The hunters thought they had the advantage of numbers and weapons, but in the forest, Rian had something strong or patience in the land itself. The first trap waited not far from the canyon's edge. The hunters followed a line of footprints that Rian had stamped deep into the mud. Their eyes fixed on the trail, they did not see the rope hidden under leaves. One of them stepped on it, and with a snap, a net of vines rose from the ground, pulling him into the air. He roared in shock as he dangled upside down, his weapon falling from his hands. The others rushed to cut him down, but by the time they freed him, laughter echoed through the trees once again. The sound burned into their pride. They pressed on, moving with greater care. But soon another hunter fell into a shallow pit covered with branches. He climbed out quickly, covered in dirt, but his anger grew. He wanted to strike something, anything. The traps were not deadly, but they were humiliating. Darnik shouted, "Do not stop. He tries to break our spirit. Stay strong." But his words carried less power now. Deeper in the forest, the hunters found another strange sight. Hanging from a branch was a wooden figure shaped like one of their kind. Its arms were wide, its face crudely painted, and on its chest was scratched a message in their language, still too slow. The hunters fired their weapons at it, breaking it into pieces, but the joke was already made. Their leader's jaw tightened. His hunters were losing their discipline. Rian watched from the shadows, his body hidden by leaves. He felt no guilt. He was not trying to hurt them. He was showing them that a single human with no weapons could still control the hunt. Every trap, every sign, every laugh was another strike against their pride. And the more their pride fell, the stronger he became. The next trap came when they entered a narrow path between two rows of thick trees. A line of stones was placed on the ground, arranged like steps leading forward. The hunters followed them, not noticing the thin ropes tied across the trunks. When the first hunter walked through, the ropes snapped loose. Buckets made from bark tipped over, pouring cold water mixed with crushed plants onto their heads. The smell was strong and bitter. The hunters roared with rage. Their armor was wet, their noses filled with the stench. Rian's laugh rang out again. High above them, one hunter aimed his weapon toward the sound, but Darnik stopped him. No, he said, he wants us to waste our shots, save them. Even as he spoke, Darnik's claws dug into his palms. He wanted to strike the human himself. But he knew the truth. The human was winning without fighting. The day grew long, and the hunters grew tired. Each step was slower, each word sharper. They blamed one another for falling into traps. They doubted the scanners when the machines failed to find real signs. Their unity, once strong, was breaking. By evening, they reached another clearing. At its center stood what looked like a small camp. A fire was lit, smoke rising into the air. Around it were several wooden boxes stacked neatly. Darnik ordered them to surround it carefully. They approached with caution, but when they opened the boxes, they found nothing but rocks inside. The food was fake. The tools were fake. Even the fire was strange, built from glowing plants that gave the illusion of flame. Above the camp, tied between two trees, was another sign. It said, "Better luck next time." The hunters groaned in frustration. One smashed the boxes to pieces. Another shouted curses into the sky. Darnik remained silent, his pride cut deeper than before. He could no longer deny it. The human was not prey. The human was the one hunting their pride. Rian sat far away, hidden in the shadows, watching their anger rise. His body was tired from the work of building traps, but his spirit was alive. He had turned the hunters into clowns, and they did not even realize they were walking exactly where he wanted them. Night fell again. The hunters made camp, but it was not like before. They placed guards at every side, weapons raised, eyes wide. Yet still they jumped at every sound. A snapping branch, a cry of an animal, even the whisper of the wind made them look round nervously. They ate little and spoke less. Their pride, once so high, was now crawling in the dirt. In the trees, Rian built his own small fire. He chewed his food slowly, watching the stars. He thought about how long he had been alone on this world. At first, it had been survival. Every day had been about fire, food, water, shelter. But now, with the hunters, it was different. He was no longer just surviving. He was teaching them a lesson they would never forget. Strength was not only in weapons. Strength was not only in numbers. Sometimes strength was patience, cleverness, and laughter. The traps had worked. The hunters were no longer the same as when they arrived. They were slower, weaker, and divided. And tomorrow, Rian promised himself, he would strike their pride even harder. The game was far from over. The hunters moved through the forest at dawn with faces dark and eyes full of tired anger. Their armor was scratched, their bodies sore, and their pride wounded. They had fallen into traps, chased false trails, and found nothing but jokes. Yet, still they followed Darnik. Though doubt grew heavier in their hearts, Darnik walked at the front, silent, his steps hard. He did not show his weakness, but inside, frustration burned hotter than fire. He had promised his hunters a quick victory. Instead, they looked like fools before a single human. He told himself that today he would end it. Today he would corner the human once and for all. But Rian had other plans, high above. Hidden in the trees, he watched them march. His eyes were calm, but a grin touched his lips. He could see their shoulders slump, their steps drag, their spirits fade. He knew they were not the same hunters who had landed full of confidence. Now they were angry, divided, and afraid of shadows. Rian's plan was working, but he wanted more. He wanted to break their pride completely. As the hunters moved deeper into the forest, they noticed the change in their own group. Some whispered to each other, blaming one another for mistakes. Two nearly fought after arguing about who should have spotted the traps. Even their voices lacked strength now. That night, when they stopped to rest, Rian stayed close. He crouched on a high branch and listened. Their fire glowed dim below. He heard their words, low and sharp. "Maybe the human is not alone," one said. "How can one man do all this?" "He is just one," another replied. "But he makes us look like children." Darnik silenced them with a growl. "Enough. He is flesh and bone. Nothing more. Tomorrow we will crush him. Do not let his tricks fool you." But Rian knew the truth. Darnik's voice had lost its strength. Even the leader doubted now, though he would never admit it. That doubt was the key, and Rian was ready. To strike it deeper. The next day, Rian began to build. He worked in silence, his hands steady, his body moving quickly despite his exhaustion. He cut branches, stacked stones, and tied vines. He made walls from fallen logs, tall and wide. He placed wooden poles upright like guards standing at attention. From a distance, it looked like a fortress rising from the forest floor. Smoke rose from a fire in the middle, adding to the illusion. By the time the hunters reached the clearing, the fortress was ready. They froze when they saw it. Before them stood a human stronghold, walls, watchtowers, even weapons leaning against the wooden barriers. For a moment, none of them spoke. Their scanners beeped, showing strong heat signals, as if many were inside. Darnik's eyes widened. He could not believe it. Impossible, he muttered. One human cannot build this. He has an army. The hunters looked at one another with fear in their eyes. If more humans were here. The hunt was already lost. Darnik roared and lifted his weapon. We strike now. We take them before they escape. The hunters charged. They smashed into the walls, tearing them apart with blades and claws. The wooden guards fell, breaking into pieces. The weapons on the walls clattered to the ground, nothing more than sticks tied together. Inside, they found no humans, no food, no weapons, no army. It was all fake. The fire was nothing but smoke from damp leaves. The heat signals were caused by glowing plants placed in hidden spots. The fortress was nothing more than another trick. As they stood there, humiliated again, a banner dropped from a tree above. The hunters looked up in shock as the cloth unfurled. Written in their language, painted with ash and berries, were the words, "Better luck next time." The clearing filled with laughter. Rian's laugh. It rolled through the trees, mocking and sharp. The hunters clenched their fists, their faces full of rage. One tore the banner apart, another screamed into the sky. But deep down, they knew. They had been beaten again. Not by strength, not by numbers, but by wit. That night, the hunters' camp was filled with silence. Some sat with heads bowed. Others cleaned their weapons in anger, though they had no target to strike. Darnik sat, alone, staring into the fire. His pride was crushed, yet he could not turn back. If they left now, the galaxy would laugh at them forever. In the branches nearby, Rian watched them with calm eyes. He saw how broken they looked, how their pride had been stripped piece by piece. He felt no hate for them, only amusement. They had come to hunt him, but now he was the hunter, and his weapon was their own pride. The night grew colder. The forest whispered with strange sounds, but the hunters barely reacted. They no longer trusted their senses. Every sound could be a human, every shadow could hide another trick. Rian smiled to himself. He had won today, but he was not finished. Tomorrow, he would push them even further. The hunters thought they were strong, but strength without patience was nothing. They thought they were clever, but cleverness without humility was weakness. Rian had shown them both, and he would show them again. As the stars filled the sky, the forest carried a soft sound, not the cry of an animal, not the rustle of leaves. It was laughter, carried on the wind, and the hunters knew they were still being watched. The night after the fake fortress, the hunters sat around their fire with heavy hearts. None of them spoke much. Their food tasted like dust, and even their strong drink could not lift their spirits. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw the banner fall from the tree with the mocking words. Every time the wind shifted, they thought they heard that laugh again. Darnik sat apart from the others. His eyes glowed with silent fury, but his mind was full of worry. He could not explain what had happened. He had faced enemies across worlds, from beasts larger than houses to armies with machines that rained fire from the sky. He had never been mocked like this. The human had turned the hunt into a game, and the hunters were the ones being played. Still, Darnik would not give up. Pride burned deep inside him. If they returned home with nothing, their names would be shamed for all time. So he told his hunters they would not leave until the human was caught. They grumbled but obeyed. Fear of shame was stronger than fear of tricks. High above, hidden in the branches of an old tree, Rian watched them once again. His body was tired, his muscles sore, but his spirit was strong. He had learned something important over the days of this chase. The hunters were not unbreakable. They were proud, yes, but their pride was a weakness. Each joke, each trick, each illusion chipped away at them, and soon they would crumble. Rion planned his final act. He knew he could not fight them all with force, but he could finish what he started. He would make them believe in something so big, so impossible, that their pride would shatter completely. The next day he began. He built not just a fortress this time, but an entire camp. He worked without rest, moving from one spot to another. He cut more branches, dragged heavy stones, and arranged them carefully. He built tents out of bark and cloth. He carved simple shapes that looked like weapons leaning against logs. He dug holes that gave the look of storage pits. He even placed clay figures shaped like humans sitting around fake fires. From above, it looked like an army camp. From the ground, it looked alive. Heat from the sun warmed the clay figures, giving false signals on scanners. Smoke rose from hidden fires where damp moss burned slowly. Even footsteps seemed real. For Rion had tied branches to ropes that dragged across dirt when the wind blew, leaving trails like boots had passed by sunset. The illusion was complete. When the hunters came upon it, they froze in shock. The camp stretched across the clearing, tents in rows, fires burning, human shapes moving, or so it seemed. The hunters scanned and counted. The signals showed dozens. To their eyes, it looked like an entire human force had landed. Fear swept through the group. This is no lone human. One whispered, "He is not alone. They are many." Another shook his head. "But how? We saw no ships. We heard no landing." Darnick stared at the camp with narrowed eyes. His mind raced. If this was true, they were trapped. If this was another trick, then the human had outdone himself again. He wanted to believe it was false. But his hunters were already losing faith. "We cannot attack," one said firmly. "Not against so many." Darnick roared. "Silence. If we turn away now, we are finished. The galaxy will laugh at us for fleeing shadows." Still, doubt flickered in his eyes. To press harder, Rion added the final touch. From a high branch, he pulled a rope. A banner rolled down the side of one of the fake tents. The hunters stared as words appeared in their own tongue once more. It read, "One human was enough." The hunters erupted in shouts. Some cursed. Some struck the ground with their weapons. A few simply dropped to their knees, their strength gone. They finally understood. The camp, the tents, the soldiers, it was all false. Just one man had done this. One man had made them run in circles, break their pride, and doubt their own strength. The forest shook with Rion's laugh again. Not cruel, not angry, just amused. Darnick's fists trembled. His pride screamed at him to fight, to tear apart every false tent, to prove he was not beaten. But his hunters no longer had the will. Their eyes told the truth. They were finished. That night, their camp was silent. No one ate. No one sang their war chants. They sat with eyes low, beaten without a battle. Darnick paced, his armor clinking softly, but he could not find words to lift them. Far away, Rion sat on a fallen log, watching the stars above. His body ached, but his heart felt light. He had done what he set out to do, not by strength, not by numbers, but by wit and patience. He had turned the hunters' pride into their prison. The forest was his ally, the night his cover, and laughter his sharpest weapon. Tomorrow, he knew, the hunters would leave, not because they chose to, but because they had no choice. A broken hunt could not continue. For the first time in days, Rion closed his eyes and rested. He knew he had won. And somewhere deep in the forest, the hunters lay awake, unable to sleep, haunted by a single truth: one human had beaten them all. The forest was quiet in the morning, filled only with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant cry of birds. The hunters stirred from their camp, but their movements were slow. Their faces were dark, their eyes heavy with exhaustion and shame. After days of chasing, falling into traps, and being mocked at every step, they had lost more than energy. They had lost pride. Darnick stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the trees. His claws dug into the dirt beneath him. He had once been proud of his strength, his intelligence, and his leadership, but now he felt hollow. The human had not fought him, had not threatened his life, yet Darnik had never felt weaker. "We leave," he finally said. His voice was low, firm, but lacked the fire it once held. "We cannot win. We have been beaten." The hunters exchanged glances. Some nodded in relief, others looked away, too proud to admit the truth aloud. The fire of competition, the spark of arrogance, they were gone. All that remained was the reality that one human, clever and patient, had outsmarted them at every turn. They packed their belongings in silence. No one spoke of the traps, the fake camps, the fortress, or the banners. It was understood. Words could not explain the depth of their defeat. Above the forest, hidden in the branches, Rian watched them. He could see every movement, every sigh, every hesitant step. He could feel their shame radiating like heat. He smiled quietly to himself, not because he hated them, but because he understood the lesson they had learned. Strength alone was not enough. Pride could be the weakest point in the strongest hunter. As the hunters prepared to leave, one of them spoke softly. "We were not ready for this." He knew the forest, the tricks, everything. How could one human do all this? Darnik did not answer. He simply looked at the forest, at the paths where they had chased shadows, at the burned trees and broken branches marking the games they had fallen for. In his mind, he replayed each camp, each banner, each laugh. Each one reminded him that he had been outsmarted, and there was no shame in admitting it. They began their march back through the forest, leaving the canyon and the illusions behind. Their steps were careful now, not in fear of the human, but in quiet respect for his cleverness. No one spoke of revenge. None expected to return. They had learned a lesson too late. Underestimating a mind as strong as a human's was dangerous. High above, Rian followed silently, keeping his distance. He had no need to interfere. The hunters had already been humbled. They had fallen for every trap, every sign, every mock camp. They had believed in shadows and illusions, and in doing so, they had learned patience, humility, and caution. For the first time in days, Rian allowed himself to feel calm. He thought about the hunt, the endless games, the laughter that had echoed through the forest. He had survived, yes, but he had also shown that one human, clever and patient, could outmatch even the strongest hunters. The sun rose higher, lighting the forest in gold and green. The hunters moved slowly, their weapons silent at their sides. They glanced at the broken traps, the fake camps, the banners fluttering in the wind. Each one reminded them of their mistakes, of their pride, of the human who had turned their hunt into a lesson. After hours of walking, the hunters reached the edge of the forest. Beyond lay the open plains, the lands of their world, and safety. They stopped for a moment, looking back at the trees, the paths, the illusions. None of them spoke. The memory of the human's laugh lingered in the wind, a soft echo that would follow them forever. Darnik finally turned to his hunters. "We retreat," he said, his voice steady now. "We have learned. Perhaps one day we will return, stronger and wiser. But today, we leave with humility." The hunters nodded, their pride replaced with respect for the human who had bested them. They marched across the plains, leaving the forest and its secrets behind. Each step was lighter than before, no longer driven by arrogance or blind confidence. They walked with a quiet understanding of patience, wit, and humility far above. Rian sat on a tall branch, watching the hunters disappear into the distance. The forest around him was calm again. The traps were empty, the fake camp still standing, the banners fluttering softly in the wind. He had won not by strength, not by weapons, but by mind and courage. Rian thought about what this meant. One human, alone in an unknown forest, could survive, outsmart, and teach a lesson to hunters stronger, larger, and more experienced than any he had faced. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and challenges, but Rian knew now that intelligence, creativity, and patience could be more powerful than any weapon. He stood and stretched, feeling the cool wind on his face. He looked at the forest that had become both playground and battlefield. The leaves shimmered in the sunlight, the branches swayed gently, and some were far below. The hunters continued their journey home, humbled but alive. Rian smiled, thinking of the lessons learned. He had survived, yes, but he had also proven something more important. One human, with patience, courage, and wit, could change the outcome of any challenge. The hunters had thought they were unstoppable, but they had learned humility. They would never forget this hunt. As he moved silently through the trees, Rian realized that the forest had been his ally, the illusions his tools, and laughter his shield. The hunters had been strong, yes, but pride was their weakness, and one human had turned that weakness into strength. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows through the forest. Rian stopped on a high branch and looked out at the horizon. He had survived, outsmarted the hunters, and learned the value of cleverness over sheer strength. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that the story of this hunt would travel far. Whispered among hunters, remembered as a tale of one human who had trolled the strongest hunters with nothing but wit, patience, and a laugh. Rian took a deep breath, the forest around him alive with sounds, colors, and life. The hunt was over. The hunters were gone, and one human had proven that intelligence, courage, and patience could overcome any challenge, no matter how strong the opponent. The forest remained calm, a silent witness to the games, the tricks, and the victories. And high above, Rian felt the quiet pride of knowing he had won not through force, but through cleverness, patience, and the understanding that one mind could change everything. The hunters would remember this day forever, but Rian would remember it as the day he proved that even a single human could outsmart the strongest, teach lessons without violence, and leave a mark on the forest and the hunters alike. The forest held its silence, the echoes of laughter fading into memory. The human had won. The game was over.